Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Nadine McCormick. I'm with IUCN's Business and Biodiversity Program. And I'm really happy to welcome you to our 8th webinar in a series that we're running through the BioBiz Exchange funded by the Agence Française de Développement, with the aim of supporting civil society to fulfill their role and their potential in transforming business practices. Today is actually a special one as well, because we're also celebrating the end of a 5-year program, the Shared Resources Joint Solutions program. It's almost like a sister initiative, a very similar theory of change funded by the Dutch government. So I'm really happy to bring together an excellent team of colleagues to share with you some of the lessons and the top tips that the local organizations with some of the international partners have developed over the last 5 years. This is also a special webinar as well, because we're running it for 90 minutes today. Because the last half an hour we're also going to dedicate to share with you some of the first analysis of the survey that we ran earlier this year to the conservation community on influencing business practices. So that will be at the end of the webinar. So I see most of you starting to arrive now as well. So let's move on a little bit on what is Panorama. So Panorama Solutions, it's born from the idea that we all learn best by sharing concrete, examples from peers who can actually, inspire us and inform us and enable us to replicate their solutions. And so it started at its origins. You might have heard of it through protected areas, but now it's much more than that. It's really now a partnership with GIZ, IUCN, UN Environment, Grid Arundel, RARE, UNDP, supported by the GEF, and the German government and the French government. And this is becoming now a one-stop shop for sharing all different solutions to different types of challenges and situations. So really, if you've got a challenge, I'm thinking in your landscape, whether it involves business or not, use this Panorama Explorer. Actually, Ella will put the link in the chat box for you there now, but she will basically, you can go there and just search for other experiences that your peers have had and some of the lessons that they've captured as well. So I really recommend it as a resource. So under that, we have a portal for business engagement, especially for civil society, government agencies, others who are trying to engage and influence business practices. There's now actually over 60 solutions on that portal alone. So, and really the lessons that we're going to share with you today are also featured on that portal. And just to say as well, this is our 8th webinar in the series. All of them that we've had so far can be found on a dedicated website. So if you go to IUCN, we Google actually IUCN BioBiz webinars, you'll see all of the previous webinars that we've had, the slides, the recordings, a short summary, and that's really, again, thanks to a lot of hard work by Ella to make sure we don't lose this knowledge. And then finally, before we get into the substance of today, for those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, so just to give you a little tour of GoToWebinar, so it's you have the control panel normally on your right-hand side, and in it you can see that you have a mechanism to sort out your audio, so you're automatically all on mute, but you can adjust your speakers there. There's also a handout function there as well, so there we've got the slides that are being shared today. That's always a question that we get. Are we sharing the slides? Yes. So you can download them directly yourselves from that handout function. And there you've got all the links as well that we're going to be referring to directly in those slides. So do download the handouts, the slides while you can. And then, unfortunately, it's not like Zoom or some of the other platforms where you have a nice chat box that all of you can have a chat together, unfortunately. But what you do have is a questions box. And so if you enter your question there or a comment or a suggestion in that box, we will receive it. And then we can either directly engage, respond to you directly, or we're also able to share some of the questions then to everybody. But I'm afraid, yeah, GoToWebinar is a bit limited on that side. And I'm afraid some of you who are asking about interpretation and translation, we really did look into that option because we'd love to be able to have this in French and Spanish, but not yet, but hopefully for a future one. Great. Okay, so then moving on, so the agenda for today. So I've nearly finished just this welcome and introduction, then I'll be really happy to hand the mic over to Romie Goedicke from the IUCN Netherlands Committee of Members, who's been my partner in crime on the Shared Resources Joint Solutions program. And she's going to share with you, well, first of all, what was Shared Resources Joint Solutions, for those of you who don't know, and some of the lessons that were drawn from some peer exchanges we had to capitalize on the knowledge and the lessons we had over the last 5 years. And then we'll share with you two examples from the Shared Resources Joint Solutions program as a way really of inspiring you on this call who are looking to work with business in your landscape. You're not sure where to start. We've got one lovely story from Benin, which is engaging the subsidiary of Heidelberg Cement in Benin. And then a second case study with Pauline from Ecotrust, exploring an engagement with Diarra Sugar when they announced they were going to double their production in the landscape. So what did Ecotrust do to help them put in place sustainable practices? So two really inspiring and useful stories. We'll have a chance then for a discussion with the presenters. So send your questions at any time during the presentations. We'll make sure we find a way of addressing them. And then, as I said, the last half an hour we'll dedicate for then the initial results of this survey that we did on influencing business in the conservation community. So Ella Diarra, my colleague, will lead on that, and then I'll supplement with some of the headlines that have come out from that survey before a final wrap up and remarks. So you'll note that we're not using video. That really is deliberate, but just to show you the lovely faces of the people who are speaking today. So yeah, we have a great team. As you can see on the top row are our colleagues from our SRDS partners, so from Pauline from Ecotrust in Uganda. We've got Isdeen, Gautier from Benin, and Maximin from the BiZ Benin Education, Environment and Education Society, all IUCN members, I'm proud to say. And then there's Romie in the middle at the bottom there, and Ella and myself. So yeah, a great team to share lessons with you today. So without, actually, it would be nice to know who you are as well. So we're going to open up a few little poll questions to see who you are, because at the moment we see we've got over 40 people on the line. It'd be lovely to hear from all of you, but there's no time for that. So let's open up the first poll. And actually just going to see what type of organization are you with. So you should see that poll popping up onto your screen now. So what type of organization are you with? And oh, I see lots of you starting to vote already. So just tick the box. Are you with let's say more like national community level organization? You're more like non-governmental organization, like maybe more international? Are you with government? I saw in the list that actually we have a few businesses and consultancies on the call as well today, and I'm excited for you to listen as well and to think, how do you like to be engaged? What is useful for you as change makers in your own organizations? And then if you don't fall in those categories, like who are you with? So it might be other as well. And actually, maybe you can put in the chat box who you're with. So most of you have voted there. Maybe 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, last chance, and we'll close that. And so, yeah, we see about half of you are with NGOs. And a number of government representatives as well. And actually, when we share the survey results later on, we can see that actually we had a much higher response rate from governments than we were expecting. So you're really, really welcome on the call, those of you who are with governments, because you have an important role to play in influencing business practices. A number of businesses and consultancies as well. So again, listen to the call today with an ear and thinking like, what is useful for you in the role that you're trying to play. And then in others, I'm curious, like put in the chat box, please, who are you, who you're with, so we can also see what type of organizations we have there. So let's just do another poll as well. So if I hide this one then, and then how much experience do you have so far in engaging with business? So you have like no experience right now, but you're really keen to start. You've got a bit of experience, but you're keen to kind of scale it up. Or you have lots of experience, and actually maybe we need to have you on one of our next webinars as well. So yeah, what experience do you have? And if you are a business, then maybe you can flip it the other way. What experience do you have with working with civil society organizations? Okay, so about 2/3 of you have voted there now. I'll give you 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and close. And so, yeah, I suppose as we'd expect, a little bit of experience, and about more than half of you, a little bit of experience. Those of you no experience, I mean, it's already great you're taking this first step to be on the call here today, and I challenge you to think about what tiny action you can take from this to actually take the next step on your journey to engaging with business. And those of you with lots of experience, we also want to hear from you. So there's a survey at the end where you can also reach out to us and let us know if you'd like to also share solutions in the future. And then just one last tiny poll before we get going. So what is your biggest challenge right now in engaging with business? And, you know, it could be with other businesses as well, if you're with a consultancy or business or with government. I mean, is it because you don't see many opportunities right now? Is it that you're just struggling on designing your strategy or like the approach to take? Or is it you kind of know what you're doing, but you just don't really have the resources right now, or like the capacity to be able to do it? Or is there something else? And then, you know, let us know in the questions box what else is going on for you. So yeah, not many of you voted on this one. I've got you thinking. Okay, so like, what is your challenge? Maybe you've got no challenge right now. Maybe it's all going fantastically. And then again, we want to hear from you. I'll give you 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll just share that with you now. So Romie, this is going to be interesting for some of the lessons that you're going to share shortly now, but actually we can see, as usual, most people actually, it's about like getting resources, getting that funding and the capacity, the people to be actually to, you know, so you see opportunities, you know what you want to do, but actually it's just about getting those resources together. So yeah, I look forward to diving into other feature too. But without further ado, let's close that poll and hand over to Romie. And yeah, I should just say, like, if you've got any questions at any time, do put them in the chat box while they occur to you, and then we'll find a way to answer them at the end. So Romie, if you can unmute yourself, and we go away with the first presentation. Thank you. Romie, you're not unmuted yet. Oh, I muted you somehow, did I? Oops. Try unmuting now. Yes.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you for this nice introduction, and welcome everybody. So from my side, what we see today, well over half of the top economic entities are corporations and not countries. So this means that business play a pivotal role in ensuring healthy and resilient planets. They are part of the solution, but as many of us know, they're also part of the problem. So engaging business is complex, especially for local NGOs or other civil society organizations. This is why special attention was given to how to engage businesses when the Shared Resources Joint Solutions Program was set up in 2016. SRDS, in short, is a 5-year partnership, as Nadine already introduced, between the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, WWF Netherlands, and the IUCN National Committee of the Netherlands, together with over 150 local partner organizations working both on the ground and globally, including the IUCN Secretariat. The goal of the program is to strengthen the capacity of local NGOs and civil society organizations in 16 low and middle income countries to join forces with the public and private sector to protect climate resilience, the water supply, and food security. 2020 is the last year of the implementation of the program, and that's why we're harvesting and sharing our lessons from the program now. The SRDS program acknowledges that CSOs, however, cannot secure ecosystem services on their own. It's therefore central to our approach to develop flexible and dynamic partnerships between CSOs, businesses, and governments. Next slide. SRDS has been active in 16 countries, as I said, 4 in Latin America, 4 in Asia, and 8 in Africa. The specific countries have been chosen on the basis of our shared track record, the biodiversity value, and the operational environment. In this webinar and in the publication we have developed, which will be launched next week, we focus on the countries marked in red. It does not mean that the other countries were ignored. In many cases, trainings have been given here, and in some cases, specific engagement was set up. for example, for Indonesia, around the financial sector. Next slide. When we started with the SRDS program, we did a capacity building assessment. And this assessment showed that many of the CSOs we worked with saw opportunities to engage with business, quite similar to what we see here in this webinar, actually. However, they felt to lack the capacity to engage with them. Based on this so-called implementation gap, we developed an approach that combined capacity building trainings with one-on-one coaching and support. What we have learned here is that this is a new topic to most CSOs we work with, so a lot of guidance is needed. To a large extent, our work has been planting seeds in individual minds, often changing existing perspectives on how to engage business. In the beginning, we saw that most of the CSOs were drawn to either a dissent approach, so protesting, or setting up a partnership that involved philanthropic support from business. What we have tried to show that there are many shades of gray or green in this case. We have also given space to peer-to-peer learning between landscapes and countries and given support to topics such as extractives that require additional attention. Our work in total has led to 350 desired changes in company, financial institution and government policy, and 12 engagements are featured in the earlier mentioned publication. Next slide. In my last 3 slides, I would like to highlight the publication Top Business Engagement Tips for Civil Society Organizations that will be launched next week. This publication is based on interviews with our CSO practitioners in the field. And based on their guidance, we've developed a 3-step process on how to engage business in your landscape. The publication is hands-on. It includes many quotes and examples, and as the title suggests, tips. Step 1, of course, is getting started. Like with any engagement, you need to understand the business context and situation. Who are the companies in your landscape? And how can you connect with them? It is, for example, often easier to connect with a globally operating company that at the global level has made a number of sustainability commitments or pledges than with a company that is not considered a global brand. But your research can also help you figure out how to engage with them. For example, what we've seen is that often many of the local companies in the landscapes are actually connected through the global value chains with larger companies. And you need to develop a tailored approach. What do you want from the engagement? Do you want to engage a company directly, for example, around a certain practice or policy that you see? Or do you want to engage them indirectly, such as via legislation? And are you doing this alone, or are you doing this with a group of like-minded organizations, which we believe would strengthen your case? Besides, it's very important to keep in mind that business engagement is only possible if the operational space allows such interactions to take place, which is unfortunately often not the case. Next slide. So you've done your homework and are ready to start your engagement. Here's the key: that the business representatives you speak to are your ally. He or she is willing to speak with you. So how can you build and foster this relationship, but also make sure that you become friends with benefits? What can you offer them, and where do they need help? And recognize that relationships aren't built overnight. For example, in the case of Ghana, our local partner, Arusha Ghana, in partnership with the IUCN Ghana Project Office, adopted a strategy to companies to learn more about natural resource management. Through a series of events and visits, companies discussed investment opportunities and involved them in the conservation dialogue and showed them how they can benefit from considering biodiversity factors. Next slide. Our last step is scaling up. Celebrate your successes, big and small, and institutionalize your engagement where possible. Help others. such as in the case of Heidelberg Cement Africa and Benin. Having a highly motivated person inside the company who was willing to carry the work forward between the local NGOs was fundamental. My last comment is good luck. We have fewer than 10 years to achieve the SDGs, and we need all civil society organizations fulfilling their role in transforming business practices. Thank you for your attention. Over to you, Nadine.
Thanks so much, Romie. No, fantastic. And as you said, I mean, like what you've condensed there in 10 minutes, you know, could actually have been like a 3-day workshop that we were hosting together. So it's great to kind of give like just a flavor of some of those. Yeah, these were tips that came actually from the partners themselves, right, and reflecting on what they learned and what went well. So, yeah, there's actually one question that came in already, actually, from Andrea from AWF. I don't know if you want to think about it now and either respond now or maybe in the discussion part later, but it's a really good point that I think we're all facing in one way or another. But now there's additional pressures on natural resources coming out of this economic crisis. The one that's unfolding even and accompanying the COVID pandemic. And so, yeah, how are we going to deal with that as a conservation community? Like, do you have thoughts on that? Do you want to answer? You can say later or you can answer now.
Well, great to have Andrea on the call. I hope she's doing well. I think it's a key challenge, and it's something we have seen also speaking to our partners that are on the ground, that it is an issue how we are going to move forward. At the same time, what I think see from my home office is that I actually see an increase in pledges and commitments, whether it's from the financial sector, whether it's from businesses, to support nature. And although it will take a very long time before that these big pledges will drizzle down to the landscape levels, I also see a quite promising move towards more attention for nature, whether that's because of the CBD coming up or whether that's because climate basically is seen as an issue that companies can deal with a little bit more. So I hope that will also lead to some positive results in the end, but that's indeed a key challenge.
Yeah. Cool. I think we might have to open that up again, maybe for the discussion later on. And actually, if you do have something you'd like to say, we could also open up. You can raise your hand. Actually, I didn't show you that. There's a raise your hand function as well. We might be able to unmute you as well. Actually, a quick question from your ex-colleague, Matthew Parr with GIZ. Is the Dutch government going to continue to support such programs as SRDS from 2021?
They're continuing with 25 strategic partnerships. Many of them are the same that have been supported earlier by the Dutch government. IUCN Netherlands has reapplied with our 2 programs, so the Green Livelihood Alliance and SRDS. And the Green Livelihood Alliance is going to continue, and the SRDS program, which had undergone some changes, was not awarded. But the Dutch government is definitely continuing with 25 partnerships, changing the scope, of course, a little bit, but still continuing. And that's also not impacted by the financial crisis that has been caused by COVID-19.
Great. Okay. Don't go away, Romie. There'll be some more discussions afterwards as well. If you've got any more questions, keep them coming. Pauline, let's go to you now. So if you can unmute yourself. Oh, no, we're not going to Pauline. Sorry. We're going to Benin first, because we deliberately put them in this order. Like, so the next example with engaging Heidelberg Cement in Benin and Togo is basically a company at the beginning of their journey, exploring how they can start, putting in place more philanthropic, sustainable practices in their landscapes. And then the example afterwards in Uganda is really getting quite operational and changing like whole policies and investment strategies. So this is like a first entry point, starting from nothing to then actually starting to build something is a really great example. So actually, Isdeen, I know that you're going to be leading on the presentation now. I ask for your patience with Isdeen, who has been practicing his English a lot. We are aware that, unfortunately, English is the dominant language, and so we should be doing more translation. But in the meantime, Isdeen is bravely presenting in English and also supported by his colleagues and Gautier, Benin, and also Maximin. So Isdeen, when you're ready, bon courage, merci, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Nadine. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I just want to make a presentation of a case study from Benin, like enhancing cooperative biodiversity action in the Benin landscape. This presenting will be done by myself, Isdeen Omolere, and Gautier, Amoussou, coordinator of Benin, and Maximin Djondo will add in a question. Next slide. Next slide, please. The context of the challenge is this case study is done in Mono River, which is the transbordering reserve, very important. And there was a lack of restoration activities in the Mono transbordering reserve. At Heidelberg, cement biodiversity managers were not fully equipped to deliver effective conservation action. More on the Mono Delta and the challenge of lack of restoration in this landscape. Nadine, champion company. Why Benin and Nantongo make? Heidelberg Cement has an international commitment to biodiversity, but its local subsidiary do not so knowing that they could potentially create an impact. It was necessary to engage them. Heidelberg Cement was already aware of potential impact on biodiversity and were organizing events to raise awareness and highlight best practices to manage biodiversity, like the Scary Life Award event, at which the company Benin and BiZ met. That same year, the NGOs met with Heidelberg's subsidiary and followed up on discussion with them. What came out of initial discussion was that there was a need to improve and increase biodiversity action, but make the importance to do so at the management level for greater impact. Another challenge has with business CSR activities. Pro-beneficial activities are not also substantial and sustainable. So it was necessary to show that it was important to go beyond the existing situation. Next slide, please. We met with Benin at workshop on engaging the private sector on biodiversity. They told about the Carry Life Award that Heidelberg organizes, which aims to connect with local stakeholders to raise awareness on biodiversity issues. We proposed 2 conservation and restoration projects supplemented with visit to the quarries, and the project were selected. This helped to facilitate future engagement work with Heidelberg and later its subsidiaries. Our solution consists in creating dialogue opportunity to drive the point home that they need and could do more in terms of biodiversity action. This discussion helped us to understand obstacles to scaling up action and come up with substantive collaboration ideas to move forward. Later, these discussions were complemented by a series of workshops and site visits. These ideas for action were carried forward with the help of the biodiversity coordinator at the time. This helped to eventually emphasize our message even more across the company, leading to an undertaking and of landscape approach to biodiversity action. The impact is Maximin biodiversity effort not only positively contribute to biodiversity, it also provides strong and inspired evidence to insensitive the Beninese private sector to follow suit. The creation of the state-created CSR charter will ensure that other businesses in that landscape become more aware of their impacts and dependencies on nature and seek to participate to biodiversity and contribution effort with the support of other NGOs. Benin and BIZ now support Heidelberg in action like the conservation and protection of hippopotamus, sea turtles, manatee, and mangroves, as well as communities engagement events. Now the management is fully on board. It's pushes its subsidiary to implement activity that benefit biodiversity. Those in charge of designing these activities regularly reach out to BIZ and Benin for input on perfecting these plans. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, we organize participatory dialogue at which we gathered civil societies, technical and financial partners, public institutions, and business to emphasize the private sector social and environmental responsibilities. These include workshops, exchange during site visit, and other activities which we have called CSR Coffee. This space allows to share perspective and knowledge about how company can contribute to sustainability goal, whether with its through public policy or voluntary action. Company understood that they could have a greater impact with their resource. With discussion, the companies understood the importance of natural resource for the sustainable of their business, and also that they can have a greater and positive impact on nature. During of this dialogue, Nantongo was invited to chair its initiative benefiting ecosystem service. The SRDS program, Child Resource Joint Solution Program, provided the right tool for BIZ and Benin to be employed and prepared for engaging with Heidelberg. We learned several lessons from the training which contribute to the level to influence that we were able to have when engaging with the company, including the necessity to thoroughly research before engaging with a business, including defining a clear message and strategy and developing a convincing argument for business. Show the company that you are competent, trustworthy, and credible enough to work together. A very interesting exercise that we also did during the training was to determine impacts and dependencies of Heidelberg on nature, as well as highlight ecosystem service and vulnerability across the landscape. This exercise was later replicated at one of the CRS coffee section. Using existing contact and network, IUCN Netherlands contact with the former biodiversity coordinator at Heidelberg facilitate discussion between the NGOs and Heidelberg and its subsidiaries. Actually, this was one of the main success factors. This coordinator was our in-company champion who was very committed to pushing the biodiversity discussion and mainstreaming it across the company and its subsidiaries. It's possible that without him, this effort would have taken longer to show fruitfulness. We have one video reconciliation of the image that companies have with NGO and strategical reposition. Working group during SRDS coffee session depends and impact business involvement in NGOs working session workshop on business engagement.
Yeah.
Is the last slide, and we can share one link review video that make a little presentation of that we are called SRS coffee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Super. Isdeen, I'm going to give you a round of applause. Seriously, I'm so impressed with you. Perfectly on time and really clear. And I hope everybody can get as much out of that presentation as you put into it. So really fantastic. I don't know if Gautier and Max, you did want to add anything, or you're just there for like questions at the end. If you unmute, I'll see that you do want to speak. So the links are in the slides that you can download from the handout section. So as Isdeen said, they've a lovely video that you can go directly to from the link in the slides, where they innovated and put in place this whole, they call it the CSR cafe session, like a really informal place for business and government and NGOs to come together to try to understand impacts and dependencies on nature. So it's a really lovely story at the beginning of a corporate journey. So really applause for Isdeen, but the whole team is a big team effort as well. So I don't know if there's no questions at the moment. If you do have questions, put them in the chat box. We'll come to that after the next presentation. Gautier, Max, I don't see you unmuted, so I'm going to move on. And then if you want to come in afterwards, then you're welcome. So let's go up a level in terms of engagement depth of a company. So this is now getting really operational. Pauline has a fantastic story to share from Uganda. So with no further ado, Pauline, if you can unmute yourself, make sure that I didn't mute you. No, you're muted. So Pauline, if you can unmute yourself, and you could talk to us about how you built on some of the initial training that we did on business engagement, like back in 2017. The Uganda was our test case for the training, and amazing what came out of it. So Pauline, over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm going to share an example of how we have engaged with one of the main sugarcane companies in Uganda that is operating in our project area, and it's called Diarra Sugar. Next slide, please. This project that I'm presenting about today is located in the Northern Albertine Rift. It's a very biodiversity-rich region. The Albertine Rift forest is known to have 52% of African bird species and 39% of mammal species. It's one of the richest biodiverse areas in Africa. But in particular, where we are working, it's a very dynamic landscape where you have smallholder farmers growing an assortment of crops, but with also commercial agriculture. And one of the main commercial agriculture is sugarcane growing. But in the midst of all that, you also have wetland degradation, you have deforestation going on, and then you have this interface between the smallholders and the sugarcane, whereby when the smallholders are opening up their land through slash and burn, the fire extends into the sugar plantations. But also you have the sugar plantation does not have a fence. Some of the sugarcane is on land they own, and some of sugarcane is through the outgrowers. But then you find people that the sugarcane estate is very big. It has forest on the estate, and it also has wetlands on the estate. So you have people, smallholders, extending their land and kind of like not respecting the boundary between them and the land that is owned by the company, the land that is currently not under sugarcane, maybe under wetland or forest. So we had a challenge. We had a challenge whereby the smallholders and the sugar companies are competing for water in the landscape, water for agriculture. But you also have this conflict between the community and the sugarcane company because of the threats that come from the community, the encroachment and the fires. And of course, you also have other initiatives or activities that are dependent upon that the water resources in the area. And yet this is also a biodiversity rich area. So the main challenge here was trying to balance the competing needs, balancing the competing needs of the sugarcane production and even expansion, and balancing it with the provision of environmental services for both the large commercial, the large scale commercial farming, but also the subsistence farming, as well as biodiversity conservation. So we needed a strategy that will reconcile nature, community well-being, as well as profits, both on and beyond the business-owned farm. By the time we started working with Kinyara Sugar, they had already started making attempts in adopting a sustainable production, but they were focused on only the estate that they own or the activities that they own, that they control. Next slide. So our engagement with them was to support the extension of those initiatives to beyond the estate that they manage. So we partnered with the government of Uganda through the Directorate of Water Resources Management, Kinyara Sugar and ourselves, through an initiative that at the time was being managed by GIZ. So SRJS made a partnership with GIZ to influence a platform that they had already started forming together. And in this platform, we started discussing the risks to sustainability. And we engaged Kinyara from the perspective of gaps in their own sugarcane development. So we invested in helping, facilitating Kinyara Sugar to understand that the sustainability of their own supply chain depended on actions that go beyond their estate, so that they can broaden their sustainable development initiatives or sustainable production initiatives from being narrowly focusing on the estate they're in charge of, to include the other value chain actors, or particularly the supply chain actors. We conducted research in which we identified the gaps to both socioeconomic and environmental standards of sugarcane production. So in the process, Kinyara, which earlier on had a plan to increase production by acquiring more land or even recruiting more outgrowers, they refocused their strategy to instead invest in production efficiency. But also they came up with another strategy, or we worked with them to come up with another strategy that will improve their engagement with their value chain actor. In that engagement, they would still increase production, but also they have different avenues or innovations to address the risks that were being faced by the poor relations with their supply chain actors. Through this process, we agreed that we would develop a catchment management plan, and we are in the middle of developing a catchment management plan right now, which will be used as it is a document, it is a tool, a policy tool that belongs to the government of Uganda, but all of us are inputting in it, Kinyara Sugar, ourselves, other civil society organizations, other government institutions, and even other private sector. We are all inputting into it, and at the end of the day, we will all adopt it as the tool that will guide investments in the landscape beyond even the sugar company that we are working with. But also the other thing that came out was that through this process of improving engagement between Kinyara Sugar and their supply chain actors, they were able to support, Kinyara Sugar was able to invest in activities to safeguard biodiversity. They were able to, that orange guy in the middle, we set boundaries on where the wetlands are so that we prevent encroachment beyond those areas, so that wetlands, Kinyara Sugar cannot have sugarcane in the wetlands, but also the communities cannot have their farms in the wetlands. And then we also had some restoration activities. And then we also had Kinyara Sugar gave some seed funding to the communities. We signed a conservation agreement between the communities and the platform, whereby the communities agreed to do certain things. For example, by a certain date, all the encroachers were supposed to be out of the land. By a certain date, they would have started restoring, and many other conservation outcomes or outputs that we agreed with them. In return, we will support the capitalization of their village savings and loans association. And you can see that gentleman over there opened up a mobile money shop as part of the rewards that he received accessing a loan from that village savings and loans association in exchange for his contribution in getting encroachers out of the land. So there are many other initiatives like that, agro-based industries and so on and so forth that people have invested in as a reward for those specific communities achieving the milestones that we agreed upon in the conservation agreements. Next slide.
It's a bit stuck, Pauline. We're trying to get you the next slide, but if you keep going, please. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, it's coming there now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what were the building blocks that enabled this to happen? The main building blocks that enabled this to happen was partnership development. As I mentioned, we also had various forms of stakeholder engagement through different platforms, because we couldn't. It's a very diverse landscape, and we couldn't have all the stakeholders engaging in the same room. So we engaged different aspects. We engaged them from different platforms. Research was also a very critical element, because it's through that research that was objectively designed and implemented that we were able to identify the risks and gaps and opportunities. The research, this particular gaps and opportunities research, was mainly revolving around water resources. What are the risks if certain investments were made in the water? What are the water-related risks, and what are the gaps? And that informed the discussions, but it also informed the baseline. We were able to establish what is already there, but we also, out of this research and out of this information, we were able to build a business case that we used to engage with Kinyara. But also we received some skills development from the SRDS program on business engagement. And through this capacity building for us as negotiators or facilitators of this negotiation, we learned how to position our idea, but also especially to be able to pick out the real issues out of the dialogue. For example, at the beginning of the negotiation, we thought that we would present to Kinyara the opportunity for certification, so that they can access the market through the certification. But with the engagement, with the dialogue after the capacity building, we realized that since Uganda sugarcane is a protected commodity, we will not be able to provide any value through certification. So we realized that we needed to change our strategy and instead focus on the benefits that will come as a result of the community engagement.
Yeah.
And indeed, Kinyara was able to save quite a bit of money due to the prevention in fires. Next, although I think that's my
I think that's it, yeah. That's great, but you have actually quite a few questions here for you now, Pauline, so don't go away. So actually, I'm just going to start firing them at you. So Fabio in Brazil, ISBN in Brazil, he was saying, so what about the communities? Are they traditional communities? Are they smallholder farmers? And does that make a difference because of different cultures, or just, so who was in that community and who were you engaging? Were they actually proper, like, I would say proper farmers, actually small farmers, or were they more like subsistence, traditional communities farmers?
What's the difference? They are smallholder farmers and they are subsistence farmers.
Yeah.
They are smallholder farmers, they are subsistence farmers, but they also do it as a livelihood strategy. But it's a mixed community, because when you have an economic activity like sugarcane growing or a sugarcane company, and also you have very many other things that are happening in the landscape. For example, we have the oil and gas developments. Those developments provide economic opportunities that attract people from everywhere. So it's a mixed pot. We have a local community that owns land, that is resident in the area, that is mainly smallholder farmers, but we also have migrant communities, although Ugandan, but we also have people that come in from other communities to stay in. Normally, those are the ones that drive the degradation, because they don't have land that is traditionally theirs, and therefore they will open up forests, they will open up wetlands. So it's a mixed community. But yes, we engaged them through community wetland associations, communal land associations, and it's through those associations that we signed conservation agreements for the communities to undertake the restoration work, to undertake the biodiversity conservation work, in exchange for the funding that that Kinyara Sugar and even ourselves gave to them to capitalize their loans associations.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you. So I've got more questions for you. Sorry, Pauline, it was such a great presentation. You've really got people excited here. So then Sylvia with the Daiichi Objectives 20 organization. So she was wondering, was the landscape engagement like a starting choice of Kinyara, or did it kind of come out as a result of the project at the end? So like in terms of negotiation, did you start thinking about landscape, or did you like, or was it put forward, and then who put it forward about going beyond the farm? How did you convince them to go beyond their farm?
The convincing them to go beyond the farm was first and foremost for us as Ecotrust. When we were going to work with them, we knew that Kinyara worked with outgrowers, and more than half of their supply comes from the cane supply comes from outgrowers. So for us as a conservation focus or organization, we were interested in the entire landscape. It didn't matter so much who owns the sugarcane, whether it's Kinyara or the outgrowers. But for Kinyara as private sector and risk-averse private sector, they tend to focus on what they can be in control of. So they had done quite a bit of investment in sustainable production, but only in the estates that they own, because that's what they have control over. So during the negotiation, it was a long, protracted negotiation for us to convince them that it's not as risky as you think, and actually by engaging your supply chain actors, you reduce your own risk. So we kind of like we gave them an opportunity to negotiate and see, for example, if they can deal with the risk of fire by having a better relationship with the community. So for them, it was a negotiation point. It was something that it took some convincing for them to extend. But for us, the other actors, we were looking at the entire landscape.
And actually, so Makipa, who I know is also involved in that example with GIZ, saying, okay, first of all, he's saying great work, and so he has to go, fortunately, but let's see if we can answer his question. He's just wondering, how is the waste management support performing at the moment? So I guess that's an in question, but before he goes, How is that waste management side going? Yeah.
Right now, I don't know, because we have been in the lockdown and we haven't been in the field. But what I know is that yes, we set up communities that are working on managing waste management, and the waste management was actually coming from the townships, that for the communities, not necessarily from the company itself. So under these uncertain circumstances, it's a lot easier to track what's happening with the company than what's happening on the community. But I believe it still goes on. But that is a bit that I'm not really 100% in touch with.
Okay. No worries. Fine. And then there's just actually one question from a colleague in Uganda. So this is Sam Mukunguzi. That's an awful pronunciation, Sam. I'm so sorry. He's actually just wondering about the Bugoma Forest Reserve and Hoima Sugar Limited. And there's about 10,000 hectares of sugar production. Is that also Kenya, or is that a different company? And maybe that might be worth an offline conversation. But just
It's in as far as I know, it's a different company, and those are some of the challenges that we have, because you take one step ahead with one actor, and then another actor takes 2 steps backwards. So that is one of the challenges that we have, that we've moved significant steps with Diarra and its supply chain partners, but the forests that we fought to save, on one hand, another private sector was licensed to grow sugarcane from a different angle. So yes, those are some of the challenges. And of course, the water risks and opportunities do not know that these are 2 different companies. So that is a huge risk that we have. And yes, it's a big new dynamic that has come into the landscape.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Hey, Pauline, I'm going to give you a break, actually. So there's one more question, where we can open it up to some of our other panelists, or Romie and Isdeen, Gautier, Max, if you want to come to this. It's a question that Andrea Athanas from Africa Wildlife Foundation asked me earlier on, and she's like, this is great, starting from like a landscape level. You've got to start somewhere, but then also, how do we get it to multiple landscapes into value chains, which really builds on the question that Sam was just asking there, and exactly how you so eloquently said, Pauline, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So how do we engage to get to that next level of multiple landscapes and across the value chain? So I don't know if Romie or any of our other partners from Benin, if you'd like to unmute yourselves and maybe just respond to that question of how to build up a larger multiple level engagement. See, nobody is unmuting. Maybe Pauline, you have thoughts on that yourself, actually, while we wait for somebody to unmute.
Am I still unmuted?
You're unmuted. Yeah, if you want to go, Pauline, yeah, you're unmuted.
Yeah, okay. Although I'm seeing other people also unmuting now.
Okay. Romie, do you want to go?
Pardon?
Let's try Romie first, and then we can come back to you, Pauline. Romie?
So I'm happy to give it a try. I think it's simply a phase that we haven't reached to with the SRDS program after the years we had of implementing this program now. Although I do think within Benin, with the different cement companies, there is more engagement between them. Also, of course, with the Togolese side. So I think for us, that also would be very much a next step of building up the relationships in which we can see how can we make combinations between the landscapes. I think in the case of the sugar, we actually, in our work in Tanzania, where we're also working with a sugar company, we actually saw some of the lessons from Uganda, and we used them, taking them forward. But it hasn't been part of the formal engagement, I would say, to say how can we link with different landscapes of the same company and connect with that value chain. And I think it's very complex for us. The entry point at the moment is either one landscape, or it's more at the global level, but then it's harder to make the connection to the landscapes where actually the impact is felt. So I think for us, that would also be the next step that we would like to develop going forward.
Thank you, Romie. Pauline, do you want to add to that, or would you like to add, Pauline, or are you done?
Yes. For us, we actually intentionally worked with Diarra as a pilot, but also the catchment management plan that we are developing is a tool for scaling up, because in the lessons drawn from Diarra are being used to develop that catchment management plan, in which we are engaging with other actors in the landscape, the maize actors, the other private sector, and so we plan to use this tool as, this catchment plan as the tool that government of Uganda will use to guide investments in the area, so that there are certain standards, some minimum standards that can be followed for all investments that are coming into the area. Now, the other thing that we are doing for the Hoima side, we have what we are calling a stick and carrot approach. On the engagement and dialogue is the carrot, but for the Hoima side, where the Bugoma side, Hoima sugar, we are taking a stick approach, where we are taking them to court, we are demonstrations, and working with other partners that have more experience and skill in that part. So we had a big partnership, whereas Ecotrust, we were the ones leading on the carrot approach. There were other partners that are leading on the stick approach. But the catchment management tool in itself is the tool that we're using for scaling up.
Yeah, okay. So actually, I think that's maybe a nice way, actually, we're going to maybe bring this kind of part of the webinar to a close. I mean, it was a really great discussion, and I say this could actually almost be like, we can tend to give like 2 to 3 day trainings on this type of theme. So great questions. And this carrot and stick approach is also really important when we talk about like different ways of engaging. So today we focused on that direct, let's say, positive, constructive, enabling partnership, but we know that the stick approach is also needed, and it's a bit the question that Andrea was asking earlier about this pressure on resources now. So this does give us a nice segue into our survey results as well, because we actually asked about both of those. So firstly, just a thank you to the presenters there for now. I hope you can stay on and listen to the survey results as well. So for the next half an hour, basically what we'll go through is, what we'll do is we'll just first of all remind you that there are lots of examples that are on Panorama Solutions that you can be inspired by. So we do have like several examples from Ghana, Guinness Ghana. There's also Thelma, I saw your question on pesticide use as well. So there's a really nice example from fruit processing in Ghana. We actually have another example on chemicals as well that Thelma produced as well. So, and there's also some more of these, let's say, the stick side approaches as well in Indonesia and other solutions. So really, like, please do go to Panorama Solutions. We have a number of inspiring examples, mainly of carrots, but also some sticks. So next slide. So yeah, if I go quickly then into the survey results. And so basically, what I'd like to talk to you about is, the survey that we did earlier in the year. Where we went to the conservation community and actually asked them, what is going on with business engagement? Like, how are you finding it? We actually had a number of responses, but I'd love to see on this call now actually who was also involved as well. So I don't see my my poll launcher has disappeared. Let's see if I can do it from here. Polls, yeah. So I'm just going to give you one more poll to see if you're still awake. So did you or somebody in your organization, did you fill in this survey? So yeah, did you, or did you, maybe you don't remember, maybe somebody in your organization did, so you can tick yes as well, and if you don't know, you don't know. But so yeah, like who actually, so about a third of you have filled it in now. I'll give you maybe 10 more seconds just to give us a sense of who's actually on the call now. Okay, where's the attendee? All right, let's give you 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. So let's close and share the results. So we see, oh, brilliant. So about a half of you, just under half of you actually filled in the survey, or somebody in your organization did. the no's, that's a shame, and the don't knows. Okay, I'm going to say next time. I don't know when we're going to take on such an endeavour again, but certainly we will be following up with some follow-up questions. So if you are interested in actually providing some of your views to this as well, do get in touch with the survey at the end of this call. But anyway, just to see if you're still there with us and if you're still awake. So so let's go on to the next slide. So we're just going to hide the poll. So I'm going to basically, Ella is now going to talk you through, she did a lot of the legwork behind this actually. So she's going to talk to you about like why we did the survey, how we did it, then who typically responded. And then I'll come back with like 5 headlines that we've been able to distill from the data so far. So yeah, Ella, over to you.
Thank you, Nadine. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So going into why we did this survey, so it's because we know that business is increasingly being reminded of its environmental and social responsibilities and impacts. And what we see is that an increasing number of them are now somewhat aware of their links with nature and want to act on it. So civil society needs to be ready to support them in doing so and guiding their biodiversity actions. So IUCN has a lot of experience with this, so we believe that the organization can and should support the conservation community in helping business change its practices. And one way to do this is to be aware of the different needs and interests that are out there. Secondly, we find that unfortunately, often the importance and the potential of civil society to influence business practices is not recognized enough. So we wanted to bring this to light through this survey, that is to show that there is indeed potential. We had 4 objectives when we designed the survey. So we were thinking of the kind of support that we could provide, and we thought it would be more fruitful to understand the actual existing needs and interests in the conservation community in order to better tailor our support. And this includes knowing what the conservation community thinks about engaging with business and confirming that there is indeed a need. Secondly, we think that it's important for civil society to share replicable best practices, which could potentially inspire others and even spark collaboration, especially within conservation actors within a particular landscape. So we expected that this survey would be the perfect way to capture the successful stories for the Panorama Solutions platform. Thirdly, we know that it's crucial to create a talented and equipped ecosystem of dedicated conservation changemakers all around the world who are dedicated to sharing and exchanging best practices between peers to in turn influence business and maximize impact. And we've already set up an online community of practice, and we hope to find more people to join that community through this survey. And finally, as you know, because it's hard to do anything without resources, we wanted to be able to use the information to target specific donors and make the case as to why they should fund our capacity building activities. So based on the 4 objectives mentioned earlier, we came up with 12 questions, including open-ended ones, which were linked to the survey. And Nadine will go more into detail about those shortly. Regarding the methodology, we used the SurveyMonkey platform, and we administered the survey in the 3 official IUCN languages, which are English, French, and Spanish. We opened it for 8 weeks, and we reached out to the various IUCN business focal points in the regions and the IUCN Commission chairs to support the dissemination of the survey. So a big thank you to anyone who has helped support this and is currently on this call. So getting into the exciting information, so we had a total of 392 responses, and what we're presenting today is the global analysis. But we also wanted to show you the regional breakdown. So as you can see, we received quite a lot of responses from the Asian, South American, and North American regions. But even in the regions where we didn't get that many answers, like the Eastern and Central European regions, the content of these answers were still quite substantial and interesting. We also did a country analysis. We will do a country analysis in the future, but in the meantime, we highlighted the top 3 country responders, which were the United States with 42 responses, India with 19 responses, and Pakistan with 18 responses. So in the green numbers, in the little bubbles under the bigger ones, you can see a percentage of member responses in that region. So for example, 50% of the total number of South American IUCN members have responded to the survey, which is amazing. So this information is particularly interesting for fundraising, for our fundraising strategy, because with this information, we can target a specific donor, for example, in Pakistan, and highlight the most pressing need that responders have selected or the most used method to influence business practices. So going more into who actually responded to the survey. So as you can see, most of our responders are from NGOs/INGOs, followed by the other category, then state and government agency, and then indigenous peoples organizations. So even though we didn't receive too many responses from IPOs, we're still very happy that they answered, as they've been IUCN members since 2016. So we were curious to find out who are in this other category, and this is where we find academia, city organizations, consultancies, trust funds, cooperatives, and so forth. Secondly, we asked responders to tick all the IUCN commissions that they belonged in, and interestingly enough, 1/3 of the responders noted that they were in at least one commission. As you can see, there were many responders who are members of the World Commission on Protected Areas, 71 of them, and we will be following up with a protected areas focal point. But we also had a good amount of responses from the Commission on Education and Communications and on Ecosystems Management.
Super, thank you, Alice. There's an awful lot of work you can appreciate that went in behind that, and so there's still more work to be done in terms of analysing. But we wanted to give you kind of these 5 headlines now in terms of what is the data telling us. And I think the first really important insight to take from this is actually there is massive, overwhelming agreement from the respondents that we need to engage with business as a conservation community in order to be able to achieve conservation outcomes. And I think this is surprising because especially those of you who are IUCN members, you've been at previous congresses, it's always thought that, business engagement is controversial, we shouldn't be doing it. But actually, if you take the strongly agree at 62% plus agree at 30%, you've got 92% of respondents who agree that we need to engage. Now, that's not to say that they, we all, as one of our participants in Uganda said, I just want to jump into bed with the devil. Like, that's not what we're about. But actually, you can see in some of the open questions is the nuances that, yes, this is tricky. Like, yes, business has different varying impacts on biodiversity, but we need to engage them in different ways to be able to address the biodiversity loss issues that, as one member from Malaysia was saying that, if we're not engaging them, that we're telling a child off when they're not in the room. Like, how do you expect them to, follow the behaviors that we'd like to see? And so, but I think this is really like the first headline that we'd like to take away from this, that yes, the conservation community is willing to step up and, want to engage with business. The next headline is actually they're also quite able to do so as well. So there are really strong foundations for business engagement that we can build on. We asked one of our indicator questions is, does your organization have a strategy or a plan to engage with business? And I have to say we were quite pleasantly surprised that more than half said, yeah, they do actually have a strategy or a plan. And we've got some nice information on what those plans are in terms of creating spaces for businesses to learn from each other, like platforms, or enabling multi-stakeholder partnerships with employees and consumers, and lots of really exciting plans. Yes, there's still a third that don't have a strategy or a plan in place. So we do have some modules and advice and guidance that is available to support with that. But then, of course, then there's the flip side. You might have a plan, so you're willing, you're ready, you've got your plan, but then do you have the opportunities? And then you start seeing the numbers come down a bit. So just under half still see many opportunities for that engagement, but then there's still about half that have few opportunities for engagement. So we need to dive into that and see how can we together support why is where are those opportunities, where can they come from? Then moving into the actual experiences as well. Again, here of 392 overall responses, we actually asked the questions on, can you give us an example of where you've had a success in influencing business practices? We've got over 200 responses to that question. So we're going to be diving more into the details of that. But again, there's a lot of experience to build on. We differentiated as well between direct and indirect engagement experiences. This is back to that carrot and the stick approach that Pauline was talking about. So in terms of direct engagement, we asked things to rank how often had you delivered joint conservation projects, or provided services like data for environmental impact assessments, or actually engaged directly with companies on their policies and their strategies. And actually, the one that came out the top was delivering joint conservation development projects. So looking at frequently and very often, that's about 43% together of the respondents who are actually engaged in those joint conservation and development projects. So again, a wealth of experience we can build on. On the indirect side, there was less experience overall. Indirect there, we mean not influencing their practices by not going directly to the company, but perhaps indirectly through consumers, through government policies, environmental or legal mechanisms, or financial mechanisms. And there, the numbers are a bit lower, but still for consumer or citizen campaigns, this is the highest one at 37%. And then very close behind, 36%, we had the government policies as well. So again, there's a lot of experience on the indirect side. I think a message to us was really on the legal mechanisms and financial institutions, really very little experience there, like under 20% of the respondents mentioned experience there. And we know there are actually very effective levers, especially in this time of, legal, regulations been rolled back, and so this now more than ever, it's becoming important to understand legal mechanisms. And there, the Environmental Law Centre of IUCN has a really great program, an introductory self-guided learning course on that, and make sure it's a feature of one of our previous webinars as well, looking at legal mechanisms. Next. Then we're coming to the enabling environment question. So this, we're just showing, this was on the public policy implementation gap. We also had a second question we're not showing now, which is on the environmental legislation. But in both cases, we asked the question, to what extent you agree that the policies and the laws exist? And secondly, to what extent do you agree that they are effective? As you'd expect, there's a gap between existence and effectiveness, but it was important for those who responded to the survey, but also for us as we go forward and work with local partners to design further capacity building activities, that we can tailor it to that enabling environment. And so your approach will look really different if you've got great policies in place and they're mostly really effective, and companies just need support to put them in place. Whereas you don't have policies, or you've got policies but they're not been very effective, and then the engagement then becomes a lot more hands-on with the company, or actually probably more so with the government and those who are actually implementing the policies and the laws in place. So this, again, I think is interesting. We've broken this down between NGOs, governments and others, and probably no surprise that governments tend to agree that the policies are more effective than maybe the NGOs would agree. But at the same time, they're still quite honest, and a number of them saying, actually, yeah, if I'm honest, they're not effective. And we know certainly from our government members, who typically are environment agencies, conservation agencies, that they're not the ones that we have the power, and it is the mineral resource agencies, the petroleum authorities, who actually do have sway. And so, yeah, I think this is also an honest reflection that then features then in the next headline, which is that we really then started saying, well, what do you need right now to be able to help you scale up your engagement with business? And here we broke it down again with NGOs and government. And so I think that the first headline to say is that across the board, even those who have got plans and strategies in place are still saying that they need support on a number of issues. So we highlighted some to be chosen through. So they were typically capacity that might support at the beginning of a journey, like how to design your approach, how to reach out to initial contacts, how to build a relationship, designing impactful pitches, etc. And so we had quite a bit of uptake for that, especially with NGOs. But I think we're also really surprised that there was a higher proportion of the government responders who actually also said, I need support too. And I think this was a lesson too, as those who've been in our training program so far, the capacity building, like our government members have sometimes been invited a little bit as a side, but really what we're seeing is that, government have a role to play too. They also want to understand how business operates the language of business, how to tailor their interventions. And so this is something that we're taking back to our membership unit and thinking, how can we both support not just civil society organizations, but also government agencies in more effectively engaging business and putting in place more effective policies and following up and implementing those effective policies. But I think the other headline to take away from this as well is actually across the board, regardless of type and experience, there's a huge interest in more of these multi-party coalitions and collaborative platforms that, you know, we might start with some bilateral partnerships with single companies, but really to get to scale for the impact that we need to see, we need to have more of these multi-party approaches. So that actually, there's a number of groups that have a lot of experience on this, and certainly the Wageningen Group, for example, have a fantastic multi-stakeholder partnership guide and others. So actually we're reaching out to some who we know have experience in this, and again, mobilizing some of that knowledge and hoping to bring that to you for our next webinar in mid-December. And then maybe just to dive into some of the details on additional needs, the things we took away as well, were actually a lot of our members are ready to go beyond just some of that early stages, some really specific advice on designing, you know, company biodiversity objectives, biodiversity action plans, some impact indicators, and then also just honestly reflecting on, you know, evaluation mechanisms for our engagements. Like, we've got to be honest, some engagements are more effective and more impactful from others. And so how can we monitor that as well? So there we've got some indicators that we can also share with you. There were some other comments around the indirect business engagement side. So a number of you saying that actually we need to be involved as laws and policies are designed, so they're actually fit for purpose, that they're not just decided by elected politicians, but, you know, civil society can be there, business to be there as well to actually ensure that they're going to be effective. And so like this is another piece that we can think of, like a combined, maybe a subset of like how to design impactful legislation, again working with the Environmental Law Centre of IUCN, which has a lot of experience on this. And then maybe a final message to us as well was a number of members saying, you know, I feel actually we've got the capacity and the resources, but what's really missing to influence business and government is that we need to align stronger together as a conservation community. And actually a number of US members who, if I'm honest, we didn't really think about, you know, United States. But in the age of Trump, actually, you know, we saw the largest number of responses came from our American members. They're crying out for support, saying, actually, we need to come together and be more effective when we're working to influence business and government. And so how do we do that? And what are the different roles of national level organizations versus international organizations, and using different pressure points and using this carrot more effectively? So this is something as well that we need to take away and think again, how can we design more effective interventions where we can work, you know, in a collaborative, collective impact way to get the change we want to see. And so finally, just in terms of next steps, there's so much more data that we need to dive into. There's a lot of cross comparison between, you know, if saying this, what does that mean for, you know, you? So we're diving a little bit more into that. We're going to pull together a report which isn't just hopefully isn't a boring, you know, report, this question, that question, but really brings a lot of the rationale together and the thinking behind this, illustrated and by some of the statistics that come from our survey. So that's work in progress, both at a global level and at a regional level, working with our regional focal points in the IUCN country offices and regional offices, and with interested members as well. And then using that maybe as a way, as like a call, instead of like a call for proposals, but call for donors. Like, we know that civil society and government have an important role to play to influence business practices. We need to invest in that to be able to get to the scale of change that we need to see within the, you know, the less than 10 years that we've got now. So really that's our intention to, I mean, managing expectations here now. It's not that we have a lot of resources to distribute, but like working together to identify some, let's say, cohorts of similar themes, similar topics in particular regions, to work together and mobilize the knowledge that we have already to support you, to support each other as peers, to get, you know, change further and faster together, is the quote that Romie said. So that's all work in progress. And another specific action is you might be hearing from from Ella, if you filled in the survey and mentioned the experience that you have as well, because we want to get more Panorama solutions onto the database, so it becomes truly that one-stop shop. So if you have a question on how to engage with business, you can go there and actually be inspired by one of your peers who's actually done something similar, maybe in a similar region or a similar stage. So that's where we are at the moment. I think, that's probably at the end for now. I'm not sure if you've got any questions at this stage. Really, there'll be a survey that you'll receive straight after this webinar, and it'd be important that you can use that to kind of communicate with us if you're keen to work together to develop something together in your particular region, to answer a specific challenge and bring together that cohort to mobilize the knowledge and get to the scale of impact. So I do see one question, actually, Romie, it's a good point. Yes, so what are the reasons for those that strongly disagreed? So I have to say, I mean, there really weren't many who strongly disagreed, and so maybe that's just one thing to say. We shouldn't give too much airtime, but those who did strongly disagree, one actually was just saying, shouldn't we flip this around? Business should be engaging us rather than us engaging them. Others mentioned the fear of greenwashing. That when we do engage with business, how do we protect ourselves from greenwashing? And actually, that is a module that we've got in development at the moment, and we will be adding that to our resource page soon. But there are tools. I mean, we shouldn't be shy about that. Like it is risky engaging with business. There are great opportunities, but how do we manage that risk? And then also just this idea of how to stay independent and autonomous when we're working with business. So we, IUCN, have quite a bit of experience on this. We design contracts in a way to try to maintain that, to be autonomous as possible. So yeah, they were some of the main issues that were highlighted. And maybe another one was on the power asymmetry, and I guess just the fear of how can our lonely NGO engage with a large company? But maybe this comes back to the alliances that have come up and mentioned a few times today as well. Actually, how do we come together then in such situations, right? I don't know if there's any more questions at this stage. We've only got a couple of more minutes left. Maybe while we're waiting for some questions to come in, we'll just move on to some of the last slides just to wrap up now. So in terms of next steps, I've mentioned that survey that should pop up automatically on GoToWebinar. Please, please, please fill that in. It's really helpful for us. We try to get better and better each time. And if you use that as well to communicate with us, if you want to submit your own Panorama solution, we can support you. So flag that in the survey. And get in touch with us as well. There's also a BioBiz workplace group that we've set up as well to create that community of practice and actually start sharing more experiences. There's 30 of us there already. If you want to join us, again, click on the link through the slide deck, which you can still download in the handout section. We'll also send you a summary email as well with all the with the recording and the slides and the summary as well next week. And just mark your diaries as well. We'll be doing a follow-up webinar on the 15th of December. It's our last one of the year. And then on our side, so aside from planning for that webinar, we're working on that discussion paper to bring the results from the survey alive. And then adding more, we're always adding more and more resources to the resources page and the BioBiz Exchange. So there you can see, how to get started, why to get started, how to get started, some useful slide decks, some exercises, some questions, some speaking notes, so agendas for meetings that you can use and apply yourselves. And if you need support for that, then please reach out to us. So with that, there's a couple of minutes left, but I think really we've got to the end there now. So thank you. There's still, 45 of us that are still online. I really, really appreciate getting to this far on the call today. This isn't the end. I really feel this is one big step forward. The Shared Resources Joint Solutions Programme has been an amazing experience. I've certainly appreciated my time in the programme, and I've learned a lot. I'm sure, with our local partners, you've heard a lot about what they've learned today as well. I really hope it's it's one step, but actually we need to take a bigger step together. And so looking forward to next steps. I'm just going to open up the mics for our panelists as well to see if there's any last comments. So Romie, Isdeen, Gautier, Pauline, are there any final comments from your side?
Yeah, thank you, Nadine, for organizing it. Well done.
Oh, thank you, Max. No, great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate all the work that BiZ is doing. And Romie, yeah?
No, I just want to echo that. And I really enjoyed listening to the survey results as well. And I think this has been great. And I think with the attention for nature and biodiversity increasing, I hope we're on a bit of a wave now, although the SRDS program is ending indeed. Yeah.
Yes, but the legacy will hopefully continue. So yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of momentum around this now. It's up to us to step up as change makers and really support business and poke them if they need and support them where needed as well to get going. So there's a lot to do, but yeah, no, thank you so much. So yeah, again, thank you to Isdeen for an amazing presentation in English, and to Pauline as well. Thank you to Romie, a lot of support to Ella as well, like doing a lot of the background work as well. And thank you to all of you for participating and joining us on the poll. And yeah, good luck on your next steps. Please keep in touch, and to be continued. So have a good rest of the day wherever you are, and take care. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.